Hey fam, this is Brett Parkin with Raw Fulfillment. I have decided to come on here and share my testimony and kind of to give you a little bit of background on me and who I am, and that way you have a better idea and get to know me a little bit better. My wife and my sister-in-law, they started a YouTube channel called Raw Fulfillment. And I've kind of just been playing in the background. I help them kind of get things started, get things created, doing all the techie stuff. I'm a big nerd, and I was kind of just deciding to, play the background role, let them be the faces of the channel, things of that nature. And, the other day my wife was making a YouTube video, and she kind of brought up a good fact that, there are probably going to be some things that, males out there, even females, might need a male perspective on, or maybe just embarrassed to talk to a female about. And, so when I heard that, it kind of put something in me. God was kind of telling me, maybe I should step up. And, I've been through a lot myself, and Lord knows I'm not perfect. I'm still kind of, working on things, trying to get stuff ironed out in my own personal life and, journey with Jesus Christ. And, before I can help anybody else out, I realized that I had to help myself out. And it's been a journey. I'm still working on it, step by step, things of that nature. And, I kind of wanted to just give a male's perspective on, certain topics, and, kind of give the males, even certain females, kind of a male perspective from my point of view, in regards to, how males think, because, sometimes, women want to talk to women, men want to talk to men, we deal with stuff on our own, types of situations. We got a lot of pride. There's a lot of stuff we don't like to admit as men. And even with women, just sometimes they don't know how men think. We're from Mars, they're from Venus, sort of say, so, I kind of just wanted to put that out there, and kind of give my best perspective on certain aspects. If there's any way that I can help somebody out, I usually like doing that. I am, for the most part, a genuinely positive person. I've had my negativity in my days. I'm not perfect, like I said, by any means, but kind of to get to, the introduction, and kind of to, give you an idea of who I am, what I've been through, and, kind of my testimony on my journey. I was born and raised in Ogden, Utah, and I had a mother and a father, two stepsisters and a stepbrother. Now, my two stepsisters I did live with. My stepbrother, he decided to go and live with his father. I didn't really get to know him until I got older, and even then it was only for a little bit of time. We never really had the chance to bond or get to know each other very well. He's a good guy. I wish him the best, When I was growing up, I was born in Ogden, but I was mainly raised in, the Sunset Clearfield area. And it was me, my mom, my dad, and my two stepsisters. And it seems like everything was going good. I had a great, happy childhood. My parents were there for me. They taught me a lot of things. I became really smart. They were great parents. They were there for me. They taught me a lot of stuff. When I ended up getting into kindergarten, they wanted to move me up to third grade. I was getting straight A's left and right. All the answers were easy for me. And really just had a really nice, great childhood. Me and my sisters got along great. Time started to pass, and my sisters started to get older. They started to want to move on with their lives and do their own thing. I don't blame them for that. You grow up, you move on. You got to take care of adult things, And my older sister, Amy, she was the first one to leave. That hurt. We did have a pretty close relationship, and I didn't understand it, but now that I'm older, I do understand it now. And my sister Amy, my sister Abby, she eventually ended up moving on too. So those were two people that were really close to me in my life that ended up kind of just dipping out. And me being a little kid, I didn't really understand it. It was kind of like, why are you abandoning us, blah, 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 blah. So at the end of the day, it was just me, my mom, and my dad. Now, ever since I was a little kid, a little baby, growing up, my dad, he was really deep into drinking, smoking pot, gambling. That was just his gig, that's what he liked to do, and, when I was young, I was very impressionable. I seen my dad smoking pot, drinking, stuff like that, and you know, being a little kid, it's kind of like, why is daddy doing this? You know, like, if daddy does it, there must be something good behind it, you know, like, hey, you know, I want to be like my dad when I grow up, because, you know, kids want to emulate their parents. I mean, who else are you going to emulate, you know? I mean, they're the ones that are supposed to be the closest ones to you. Well, when I was growing up, I had a perception of who God was, but I didn't really know who God was. And one day I ended up getting talking with my dad. I was at a very young age, very, very young. And I had talked to God before I was born, but I didn't know what it was or who it was. And that's a video for a different story that I'll share with you guys later. That's like a whole different trip in itself. So anyway, I got to talking to my dad. I was all like, what created us? And I'm like maybe 3 or 4 at this age. And me and my dad were playing board games. I think it was like Uno or Sorry or something like that. And I'm like, well, who created us? My dad's, you know, typical regular answer. He's like, well, me and your mom did. And I was like, no, who created us? And that's the first time he ended up telling me. He's like, well, a lot of people like to call it God, you know? And it even tripped him out. He kind of looked at me and he's like, that's kind of a complex question for someone of your age, you know? And then at that point, he just got up and left. You know, it was kind of like one of those like awkward situations where I was like, why is, you know, my son asking me about, you know, God, you know? It was like, where did that come from, you know, type of a situation. I mean, I was so young. I was like watching little kid cartoons at that point, you know? And so that kind of gave me the basis of like, you know, a God perspective. Started growing up a little bit more. I was probably in and around 6, 7 years old. And my parents were having problems, you know. My mom, she wasn't liking the drinking, smoking, gambling, stuff like that my dad was doing. My dad didn't care. He was really hung up on the party lifestyle, the gambling lifestyle, and figured he didn't need to change, you know. He wasn't going to change for nobody. And, you know, it got to the point to where, you know, they ended up wanting to separate. And I didn't really exactly know what was going on, you know. It was kind of one of those things where it was like, I hope that it didn't happen, but it seemed inevitable. And so they ended up splitting up for a while, you know. I ended up living with my mom for a bit, my dad for a bit, and I was just kind of bouncing from house to house, you know. And I was still making great grades, straight A's, you know, just really good kid. You know, didn't really have any kind of problems in the world, and it didn't really bother me, you know, that they were having problems, because I was like, oh yeah, you know, mommy and daddy, they're gonna get back together again, you know, arguments are arguments, whatever, tra-la-la. And then we ended up moving to Clearfield, and it was almost seemed like they were trying to, you know, do a second chance type of a situation, one last shot just to see if things work. And while we were living in Clearfield, I was probably 6 or 7 at the time, super young still. And I was in my bedroom. I had the lights off. I think that they thought that I was asleep, but I wasn't. I actually heard them fighting through my bedroom door. And I kind of knew, you know, what was going to be happening. I had a feeling that they were going to get a divorce. I didn't want it to happen, but, you know, from the screaming matches and everything that they were having, you know, and just all of the problems going on, it almost seemed, you know, like it was just bound to happen. And I was in there in the dark, and I was by my door, and I was crying to myself. I don't know if they heard me or not, but, you know, I was pretty distraught. I had a good feeling that they were going to split up, and I was starting to feel alone. And at this point, I kind of cried out to God, and I was talking to God about my situation. I was like, you know, if they end up splitting up, you know, I don't want to be alone. I need somebody in my life that, you know, I can share my life with, you know, somebody I can, that will just be there for me, you know, because I had a feeling I was going to be alone, you know, and that was a scary thought to me, you know. I wanted somebody to be there for me, of course. Strangely enough, God gave me a vision of a girl that was supposed to be my so-called soulmate. And it was so weird because he had spoke to me too. And he told me that you're going to find her in her imperfections. She's not going to be perfect by any means. And I just had this overwhelming feeling like, hey, you know, if she's supposedly the one for me, then I'm going to go after her, you know, like I'm a romantic like that, you know. And, you know, I was like, hey, if, you know, she's going to be the one that's going to be there for me so I don't feel alone, then hey, awesome, you know, there's somebody out there for me, and, you know, I won't have to spend the rest of my life alone. Anyway, God kind of gave me a stipulation on that. He ended up telling me, he's all like, you got two separate roads you're gonna have to choose from. One is going to be the road to a good life, riches, good everything, but you're never gonna meet her. Why? Because she's not perfect. She has her own imperfections, and even if you did meet her, you're gonna be so hung up on your money, so hung up on your possessions, that it's not gonna matter. It's not gonna be true love. You might meet her and then, you know, you guys split up or whatever, and it's gonna be peace. You know, I'm set. You know, I'm not gonna need you in my life. I'll find somebody else, you know. Or just be so worried about that they're gonna try and like get a hold of my possessions or whatever, you know. And this is coming from like 6 or 7 years old, so, you know, it was like, whoa, okay, you know. But he told me, he's like, if you do want to meet her, you're gonna have to take the road less traveled. You're going to have to go down a lot of bad roads, go down a lot of adversity, sort of say, troubled times. And you know, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I had a choice to make. And you know, me being the romantic, me wanting to meet this person, I dedicated my life to try and find her. And I know it may seem crazy, but riches never concerned me. You know, materialistic stuff never concerned me. I figure I can always get that. Things can change in a heartbeat, blah, 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 blah. I wasn't concerned about that. I was more concerned on finding that one that was supposed to be there for me, you know, through thick and through thin, somebody I can talk to, somebody I could open up to, you know, and not have to worry about losing. And the so-called soulmate, you know. So anyway, I gave my life to try and find this girl. And at that point, I kind of was just still doing my own thing, you know, still getting pretty good grades and stuff like that. And, you know, my mom and my dad eventually split up. And it really didn't sink in until I met my stepfather. When I seen him pull up in his motorcycle, it was kind of the nail in the coffin, you know, like, I remember asking him, like, the first day he even came up and they started dating, are you going to marry my mom? You know, because it was more of like, you know, is this for real? You know, is this a dream? What's going on? You know, type of a situation. My dad was kind of skipping from house to house with my, you know, aunts and uncles, stuff like that, trying to find a place of his own. He eventually ended up moving out to West Clinton with my uncle. And my mom eventually ended up moving out with my stepdad out to Oregon. With my mom and my stepdad, when they first met, my stepdad it was a toxic relationship. They didn't get along well at all for like years. I mean, it seemed like every other time, you know, I would hang out with him and talk with him and everything like that and spend time with him and just be around him. I've lived with him a couple of times. You know, one minute everything seems like everything's all good, everything's cool, then the next minute my mom's leaving him, you know, and not wanting anything to do with him or anything like that. And, you know, she would always, you know, tell me about it. I mean, she's terminally ill, so, you know, she was always talking to me about death and, you know, like this, that, and the other. And, like, they were always battling. I mean, it seemed like all the time, like one minute, oh, I'm going to leave him. She took off to my aunt's a couple of times. And, you know, it was just a really toxic relationship. They didn't get along very well. You know, that was them. My dad, as I mentioned, when he was single, it was almost like the same routine. You know, he was still into his partying, his smoking, his drinking, his, you know, doing whatever, just kind of that, you know, basic lifestyle, world lifestyle that, you know, we all love. You know, it's like something that we choose. It's a part of life, you know, stuff like that. And I ended up living with my mom and my stepdad for a while, and it just became really toxic. You know, and my mom could see it. She knew. She was like, you know, you should probably go live with your dad. You're a male. He knows more about male things and can teach you to be more of a man. And so I eventually ended up moving with my dad. Me and my dad, you know, we had a good relationship, but it was kind of on mixed feelings. And the reason why I say that is because, you know, when I was young, I was starting to feel that loneliness bite at me. And I really needed someone I could talk to, someone I could open up with. But it always seemed like whenever I tried to talk to my dad, we'd always butt heads over stupid stuff, you know. And it was just one of those things that was difficult to deal with. It even got to the point to where, like, you know, I talked to him. I was like, hey, you know, right now I need a friend in my life. I need somebody I can turn